Gianni Infantino stood in front of cameras and confirmed it himself. $11 billion. That is what FIFA expects to make from this single tournament, the most profitable sporting event in the history of organized sport, by his own account, delivered with the confidence of a man who believed the math would silence every critic. Now watch the screen go dark, because behind that number is a wreckage Infantino did not mention. Days before this tournament opened, host cities quietly released 70% of their block-booked hotel rooms. Resale ticket prices for group stage matches fell 23% in a single month. 87 of 91 American and Canadian fixtures saw their entry price drop in the final weeks before kickoff. The market FIFA insisted was the most in demand in history was, in practice, setting prices the actual fan base would not pay, and then correcting itself, week by week, downward, toward whatever level real demand could actually support. They told us this would be the most in-demand tournament ever. Behind the curtain, hotels are emptying, scalpers are losing money, and FIFA is scrambling to hide the wreckage it built. Stay with this, because the wreckage runs deeper than ticket prices. Here is what almost nobody outside City Hall ever sees. The actual hosting contracts FIFA requires cities to sign, hundreds of pages of obligations, the overwhelming majority of which fall on the city, not on FIFA. Free transit for every ticket holder, originally promised in FIFA's own bid documentation, labor law exemptions carved out for FIFA's preferred contractors, a ban on competing concerts or major sporting events across an entire city for weeks at a time, preferred procurement status for FIFA's corporate partners in local tenders, extensive tax exemptions on FIFA's commercial activities inside the host city, and the detail that should genuinely disturb you. FIFA requested VIP access to hospitals for its own officials and delegates, not emergency medical care for athletes, priority hospital access, written into a contract, for the people running the business side of the tournament. The free transit promise, the one fans were told about in the original bid that won these cities the right to host, was quietly removed. Vancouver and Toronto both confirmed free transit would now apply only to volunteers, not to the ticket holders who were promised it from the start. That is not a footnote. That is a promise made to win a bid and broken after the bid was won. In Toronto, no major competing events are permitted from June 11th to July 3rd, with only 5 non-consecutive exempted days. In Vancouver, the blackout runs from June 12th to July 8th. A 40-year community festival was forced to move its dates to August, because the only suitable dock sits directly beside the World Cup venue FIFA now contractually controls. A jazz festival lost headline acts entirely because larger artists chose to avoid the city rather than risk a scheduling conflict with FIFA's commercial footprint. But here is where the story turns. Because in Canada, FIFA ran into something it had not fully planned for: Canadian law. Several of FIFA's requested concessions were not just politically uncomfortable, they were legally impossible without legislative changes no government was prepared to rush through for a football tournament. Toronto and Vancouver pushed back. And FIFA, an organization built on the reputation that its contracts are non-negotiable, backed down, softened its demands, renegotiated the fan festival terms. That almost never happens. It happened here because 2 Canadian cities refused to simply sign whatever FIFA put in front of them. Now look south at what FIFA's chosen primary host actually delivered for the teams it invited. Iran qualified for this World Cup fairly on the pitch, like every other team, but the United States government refused to allow the Iranian squad to sleep on American soil overnight. The result is a diplomatic embarrassment without precedent in World Cup history. Iran bases its entire tournament camp in Tijuana, Mexico, and crosses an international border before and after every single match, flying into Los Angeles to play at SoFi Stadium, flying north to Seattle for their fixture against Egypt, and returning to Mexico each time, a World Cup squad managing international border logistics as a routine part of match week. In the world's most powerful sporting organization's signature event, it does not stop with one team. Fans from 75 countries faced halted visa processing that made planning a trip to this tournament functionally impossible. 4 qualified nations, Iran, Haiti, Ivory Coast, and Senegal have supporters who cannot enter the host country to watch their own teams play a World Cup their nations earned the right to compete in. That is not a logistics problem. That is teams who qualified fairly being denied the most basic thing football promises its fans: the ability to show up and watch. The financial picture behind all of this makes the imbalance even harder to ignore. All three levels of Canadian government have already spent hundreds of millions of dollars preparing for this tournament. Toronto's own FIFA World Cup Secretariat revealed in late May that only 4 host city sponsorship packages had been sold with days remaining before kickoff, leaving the city's commercial team scrambling to close budget gaps that should have been closed months earlier. An estimated $800,000 was added to Toronto's costs alone when FIFA requested up to 50 paramedics on standby at every single match. New Jersey saw FIFA contribute $0 toward a $48 million security and transport bill. Philadelphia had 2,000 hotel reservations canceled by FIFA at short notice, with no warning and no compensation. Kansas City built its entire planning model around visitor projections that simply never materialized, and before a single ball was kicked, the resistance had already begun. Chicago and Pittsburgh both refused to sign hosting agreements for the 2031 Women's World Cup, citing the exact kind of one-sided demands that appear throughout the 2026 contracts. Over a dozen cities dropped out of the bidding process for this tournament entirely before the final hosts were ever selected. The unconditional enthusiasm cities once had for hosting a World Cup, the kind that let FIFA write whatever terms it wanted into a contract, is eroding in real time, and FIFA's retreat in Toronto and Vancouver proves the organization knows it. So here is the full picture. FIFA controls the competition and collects the overwhelming majority of the revenue. Governments and host cities assume most of the cost, most of the legal risk, and most of the practical burden. $11 billion flows toward one organization while cities cancel community festivals, taxpayers absorb infrastructure costs, and an entire national team sleeps in a different country than the one it competes in. This tournament was sold to the world as football's greatest celebration. What the contracts, the empty hotel blocks, and the collapsing resale market actually reveal is something closer to the largest commercial extraction in the sport's history, conducted at the expense of the cities, the fans, and the teams that made it possible in the first place. So tell me what you think in the comments. Is this still a celebration of football, or is FIFA running the biggest commercial heist the sport has ever seen, and getting cities to pay for the privilege of hosting it? Like this video if you want the contracts explained instead of the highlight reel. Subscribe. We are tracking every clause, every cancelled festival, and every city that finally says no until this tournament's final whistle on July 19th. Football is never just a tournament. It is a question of who actually pays for the show, and who walks away with the money.